A crack of thunder rolled across the sky as heavy rain pounded the forest floor. The storm had settled in for the night, draping the landscape in darkness, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning. Hidden beneath the towering canopy, a woman trudged through the thick undergrowth, her breath steady despite the unforgiving terrain. Evelyn Carter had spent the last 3 days tracking something, or rather, someone. Her boots squelched against the soaked earth as she scanned the area with her handheld scanner, its dim blue light flickering across the rain-streaked bark of nearby trees. The screen pulsed with a weak but unmistakable energy signature. Whatever it was close. She pulled her hood lower over her face, shielding herself from the rain, and stepped carefully over a fallen log. The scent of damp earth mixed with something else, a metallic tang in the air that sent a ripple of unease through her. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, eyes narrowing as she followed the scanner's signal. Then she saw it. At first, it was just a lump of darkness nestled against the roots of a massive tree, barely distinguishable from the shadows. But as she stepped closer, the shape came into focus, a large, motionless form curled against the base of the tree. A long tail lay half buried in the mud, jagged scales glinting faintly under the dim light of her scanner. A dragon. Evelyn sucked in a breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had heard rumors of them. Winged creatures from forgotten war, once revered, now hunted to extinction. The thought of finding one alive, here on this remote planet, was impossible. And yet there it was. The dragon barely stirred as she approached. Its breathing was ragged, each exhale shuddering through its massive frame. Deep gashes marred its body, scales chipped and torn as though it had barely escaped a vicious battle. Blood, thick, dark, and oddly luminescent, seeped into the mud beneath it. Evelyn hesitated, torn between awe and alarm. "You're not supposed to exist," she whispered. The dragon's eye fluttered open, a single golden iris locking onto her with weary intensity. Then it spoke. "Help me," it rasped. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The dragon spoke. She wasn't sure what shocked her more, the fact that it was alive or the fact that it had just begged her for help. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She knelt beside the dragon, her fingers hovering over its battered form. Up close, she could see just how bad its injuries were. Deep gouges along its ribs, torn wing membranes, and a long, jagged wound across its flank that still bled sluggishly. Whatever had done this had meant to kill. "I need to stop the bleeding," she muttered, setting down her scanner. "You're lucky I came prepared." The dragon gave a slow, wheezing exhale. "Lucky," it echoed, voice raw and laced with pain. Evelyn dug into her pack, pulling out a small case of medical supplies. The tools were meant for humanoids, but she could make them work. She reached for a vial of coagulant and a sterilized patch, then hesitated. "This is going to sting," she warned. The dragon let out a weak huff, almost a laugh. "Do it." She pressed the patch to the worst wound. The dragon flinched, a deep rumble shaking its chest, but it didn't lash out. Slowly, Evelyn worked, sealing the gashes with careful hands, dabbing away blood where she could. "What happened to you?" she asked as she worked. A long silence. Then, the dragon's voice rumbled low. "Hunters." Evelyn frowned. "Poachers." "More than that," it rasped. "They want us gone. All of us." The words sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. She had heard rumors, whispers of dragons being hunted to extinction, their bodies valuable on the black market. But to see one like this, broken and bleeding, made it real. She looked up, meeting its golden gaze. "I won't let them find you." The dragon's eye flickered with something unreadable. Doubt? Hope? Evelyn finished dressing the wounds, then sat back on her heels. Rain still poured down, soaking her to the bone, but she barely noticed. "We can't stay here. Those hunters might still be nearby. My ship is close. If you can walk, I can get you out of here." The dragon didn't answer immediately. Then with a slow, pained groan, it shifted. Muscles bunched beneath tattered scales, and it tried to rise. Its limbs trembled. For a moment, Evelyn thought it might collapse. But then, with a great effort, it stood. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Can you fly?" she asked. The dragon's wings twitched, but it didn't open them. "Not yet," it admitted. "Then we walk," she said. The journey back to her ship was slow. The dragon limped beside her, each step labored but determined. Evelyn kept watch, ears straining for any sign of pursuit. The storm masked their movements, but also concealed threats. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the treeline broke, revealing a clearing. Nestled within was Evelyn's ship, its sleek hull reflecting the dim light of her landing beacons. She sighed in relief. Almost there. The dragon paused, staring at the vessel. "You would take me with you?" "Of course," she said without hesitation. Another long silence. Then the dragon lowered its head slightly, almost a bow. "I am Kaler." Evelyn blinked. "A name." "Nice to meet you, Kaler," she said, stepping forward to key in the ship's access code. The hatch hissed open. "Let's get you inside before." A sharp crack echoed through the air. Evelyn barely had time to react before a burning bolt of plasma sizzled past her shoulder, missing her by inches. "Snipers!" Kaler let out a growl, stepping in front of her, his tattered wings flaring instinctively. Evelyn whirled, heart hammering, reaching for her sidearm. Out of the darkness, figures emerged. 5 of them, armor-clad, rifles raised. Their helmets gleamed under the ship's light. "Step away from the dragon," one of them ordered, voice distorted by a helmet modulator. Evelyn's grip tightened on her gun. "Not happening," she said. The leader shifted, his stance predatory. "Then you die with it." Kaler snarled beside her, golden eyes burning with fury. Evelyn took a deep breath. So this was how it was going to be. She braced herself, and the storm raged on. Evelyn's mind raced. 5 hunters, all armed. She had her sidearm and a wounded dragon at her back. The odds weren't great. Kaler let out a low growl, golden eyes locked on the figures. Even injured, his presence was overwhelming, a force of nature barely restrained by his pain. But he was in no condition to fight. Evelyn raised her gun, keeping her stance steady. "You fire one more shot, and I'll make sure at least one of you doesn't walk away." The leader chuckled, stepping forward. "Brave," he said, "but foolish. Do you even know what you're protecting?" Evelyn didn't waver. "I know enough." The leader tilted his head. "Then you know dragons are dangerous. They're not pets. They're not friends. They're weapons. Living war machines left over from an age when they ruled the stars. And you're standing between us and one of the last." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She had heard the stories, tales of dragons as celestial conquerors, wielding powers so immense that entire civilizations had fallen before them. But Kaler wasn't some ancient warlord. He was battered, bleeding, alive. "You're wrong," she said. The leader let out a sigh, as if disappointed. "Then I guess we do this the hard way." His fingers tensed around his rifle. Evelyn saw it before he pulled the trigger. She moved. The plasma shot seared the air, barely missing her as she dove to the side. She rolled into a crouch, firing back. A shot struck one of the hunters in the leg. He grunted, stumbling but didn't go down. Then the world erupted in fire. Kaler roared. Not just a sound, an earth-shaking force that sent a shockwave through the clearing. The hunters faltered, their formation breaking for just a second. And that second was all Evelyn needed. She sprinted, closing the distance. She slammed into the nearest hunter, knocking his rifle aside before jamming the barrel of her gun into his side and pulling the trigger. A muffled scream. The hunter crumpled. Evelyn twisted away as another plasma bolt sizzled past her. Kaler moved. His injured body protested, but raw fury drove him forward. His claws raked across the ground, kicking up mud as he lunged. A tail swipe sent one of the hunters flying, smashing into a tree with a sickening crack. The remaining 3 regrouped, raising their weapons. Evelyn knew they were about to open fire. She didn't have time to think. She just acted. With a burst of speed, she darted toward the ship's console. Her fingers flew across the panel, inputting emergency protocols. The ship's auto turrets activated. With a mechanical whir, 2 mounted cannons unfolded from the hull, swiveling toward the intruders. Override engaged, Evelyn snapped. Weapons free. The ship's turrets roared to life. Plasma fire rained down on the hunters. They dove for cover, but the clearing was open, exposed. One managed to roll behind a fallen log, but the others weren't so lucky. Two fell under the barrage, armor melting, bodies motionless. The leader survived. He crouched low, raising his rifle for one last desperate shot. His aim locked onto Kaler. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She fired first. Her shot hit true. The leader staggered, his weapon dropping as he collapsed to one knee. Blood pooled beneath him. He turned his head toward her, helmet half burned away, revealing a sneer. "This isn't over," he rasped. Then, with the last of his strength, he tapped something on his wrist. A beacon. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Kaler, we need to go. Now." The dragon didn't argue. He was already moving, limping toward the open hatch. Evelyn grabbed her pack and sprinted after him. Behind them, the beacon pulsed, an unmistakable signal. More would come. The ship's engines roared to life. Evelyn barely made it inside before the hatch sealed. She stumbled into the cockpit, slamming the controls into launch mode. The ship trembled. Outside, distant shadows flickered in the sky. More hunters. Evelyn gritted her teeth. "Hold on." The thrusters ignited, and in a burst of light, they were gone. Evelyn's ship tore through the sky, pushing its engines to the limit. Alarms blared, warning her of incoming hostiles. The beacon had done its job. More hunters were on their way. Kaler was curled up in the cargo hold, his breath ragged. Blood still trickled from his wounds, but his golden eyes were locked on Evelyn as she piloted the ship. There was trust there, a fragile, unspoken bond. But trust wouldn't save them from what was coming. The radar flickered, then flared red. Multiple contacts inbound. "Shit," Evelyn muttered. She yanked the controls, sending the ship into an evasive maneuver just as a plasma bolt streaked past, missing them by meters. The hunters weren't wasting time. They were shooting to kill. A garbled transmission crackled over the comms. "Human," a deep, rasping voice growled. "You cannot run forever. Surrender the dragon." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "How about you go to hell?" she shot back, cutting the comms. She glanced at the NAV screen. Her destination was still a few minutes out, but she had to make it there in one piece. A warning light flashed. Lock-on detected. No, no, no. Missiles launched. Evelyn yanked the ship into a dive, skimming dangerously close to the planet's surface. The missiles screamed after them, closing in fast. Kaler's head lifted. He rumbled, a deep sound that made the metal around them tremble. Then he moved. Despite his injuries, he forced himself up, making his way toward the cockpit. "Evelyn," he said, voice rough, "open the cargo hatch." She shot him a look. "What? Are you insane?" His eyes burned. "Do it. Trust me." She hesitated, but only for a second. With a flick of a switch, the rear hatch cracked open. Wind roared through the ship. Kaler inhaled deeply. And then, for the first time since she'd found him, he unleashed. A blast of searing, golden fire erupted from his jaws. It tore through the open hatch, slamming into the missiles just before they struck. The explosion rocked the ship, but the danger was gone. Evelyn whooped. "Hell yeah." Kaler slumped, exhausted. The effort had cost him, but they weren't safe yet. The hunters were still closing in. Evelyn gritted her teeth, eyes scanning the terrain. And then she saw it. A massive canyon stretched out below her destination. Without hesitation, she dove straight for it. The hunters followed. The ship hurtled into the canyon, weaving through narrow rock formations at blistering speed. The hunters fired wildly, plasma bolts scorching the cliffs, but missing their mark. They were fast, but Evelyn was faster. She took a sharp turn, skimming so close to the walls that she could see the scratches in the rock. One of the pursuing ships wasn't so lucky. It clipped the canyon edge, spiraling out of control before exploding in a fiery burst. The remaining hunters hesitated, wary of the tight maneuvering. That was all the opening Evelyn needed. She pushed the ship into overdrive. A hidden hangar loomed ahead, her safe house. It was a tight squeeze, but she knew these controls like the back of her hand. With expert precision, she gunned the thrusters and shot into the hangar, just as the doors slammed shut behind them. The ship skidded to a halt. Silence. Evelyn let out a long breath. They had made it. For now. Kaler slumped back, his massive form heaving with exhaustion. She turned to him, heart still pounding. "You good?" His eyes half-lidded, but he managed a weak nod. "You saved us back there," she admitted. That was incredible. A small, almost imperceptible smile ghosted across his face. "You saved me first," he murmured. Evelyn leaned back in her seat, staring up at the ceiling. The fight wasn't over. The hunters wouldn't stop. And now, she had a choice to make. Run or fight. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She sat in the cockpit, fingers drumming restlessly against the control panel, listening to the faint hum of the ship's systems. Every now and then, she stole a glance at Kaler. He was asleep now, sprawled across the floor of the cargo hold, his breathing deep and steady. His wounds were healing, though the scars would remain. He looked peaceful. For the first time since she'd found him, he wasn't running. But that peace wouldn't last. The hunters were still out there, and they wouldn't stop. Evelyn ran a hand through her hair. She had spent most of her life trying to stay out of trouble, moving from one job to the next, never getting involved in anything that could put a target on her back. And yet here she was, hiding in a secret hangar with a fugitive dragon, hunted by some of the deadliest mercenaries in the galaxy. Funny how life worked out. Kaler stirred, his golden eyes flickering open. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "You're thinking too much." Evelyn snorted. "Can't help it." He shifted, wincing slightly. "You're worried." "Of course I'm worried. You saw those guys out there. They're not giving up." Kaler exhaled slowly. "They never do." Silence stretched between them. Then Evelyn sighed. "All right, no more running." Kaler's head tilted. "You've decided?" She nodded. "If they want to fight, they'll get one." Something in Kaler's expression changed. A spark of something deeper, pride, maybe. "You are brave, Evelyn." She scoffed. "Nah, just tired of being pushed around." She stood up, stretching. "We got work to do." The hidden hangar was stocked with supplies, weapons, and, most importantly, a defense system. Evelyn wasted no time. She activated the auto turrets, set up the perimeter shields, and prepped the ship's weapons. She had no illusions about this fight. If the hunters came in force, she wouldn't last long. But if she could even the odds... Kaler watched her work, his tail twitching absently. "You are preparing for battle," he observed. "Yeah," she said, not looking up. "You up for it?" He flexed his claws. "Always." Evelyn grinned. "Good, because we're going to need every advantage we can get." The first attack came at dawn. A scouting drone slipped past the canyon's edge, scanning for movement. Evelyn took it down with a single sniper shot. The hunters knew where they were now. An hour later, the real fight began. Gunships roared in, cutting through the sky like blades. Plasma cannons lit up the cliffs, scorching rock and steel. Evelyn ducked behind cover as the first wave of mercenaries dropped in. "Here we go," she muttered. Kaler moved beside her, his golden eyes burning. And then, as the first mercenary rounded the corner, he struck. Flames erupted, consuming the enemy in an instant. The others hesitated, stunned by the raw power they were facing. Evelyn took the opportunity. She fired. One by one, they fell. But more were coming. Too many. A missile slammed into the outer shield, causing it to flicker. Evelyn cursed. "This isn't working," she called over to Kaler. "We need to change tactics." He growled, shaking off the last remnants of exhaustion. "Then we take the fight to them," he said. Evelyn grinned. "Now you're talking." She sprinted toward the ship. "Cover me." Kaler leaped into the fray, tearing through the enemy lines as she powered up the engines. The hangar doors burst open. The ship blasted out of the canyon, guns blazing. The hunters scrambled, caught off guard by the sudden counterattack. Evelyn pushed the thrusters to max, weaving through enemy fire. Kaler launched from the ship's open hatch. Mid-air, his wings unfurling for the first time. The sky lit up. He roared, his fire slicing through the enemy fleet like a blade through paper. The hunters panicked. They had underestimated him, underestimated them both. And that mistake was fatal. By the time the dust settled, the sky was clear. Evelyn let out a breath, staring at the wreckage below. They had won, but something told her it wasn't over. Kaler landed beside her, his wings folding. He looked up at the stars, a distant expression on his face. "They will send more," he said quietly. Evelyn nodded. "Yeah, I know." Silence. Then Kaler looked at her, his gaze searching. "There is something I must tell you," he said. And the way he said it, so serious, so final, sent a chill down her spine. She swallowed. "What is it?" Kaler hesitated, and then he said something that changed everything. Evelyn braced herself. Kaler's golden eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. "I am not the last of my kind," he said. The words hit her like a shockwave. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. "What?" Kaler exhaled slowly. "There are others. Hidden, scattered, but alive." Her mind raced. She had spent the last few days thinking she was protecting the only surviving dragon in the galaxy. But if there were others, "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked. Kaler looked away. "Because I was not sure you would believe me, and because it is dangerous knowledge." Evelyn ran a hand through her hair. "So, where are they?" He hesitated. "A prison world, a place where my kind were taken long ago. I escaped, but the others were not so lucky." Her stomach twisted. "And now that I have revealed myself," Kaler continued, "the hunters will not stop. Not until they find the others and erase us completely." Evelyn sucked in a breath. The fight they had to survive, the mercenaries, the fleet, the firefight, it had been bad. But now she understood. That was just the beginning. She looked at Kaler, this dragon who had become her friend, who had trusted her. "Then we go after them," she said. Kaler's head snapped up. She crossed her arms. "You said they're in a prison, right? Then we break them out." Kaler studied her, something unreadable in his expression. "You would do that?" he asked. Evelyn snorted. "Damn right I would." Something flickered in his eyes, something fierce, something like hope. He nodded. "Then we must move quickly. The hunters will regroup. We must strike first." Evelyn cracked her knuckles. "Good. I was getting bored anyway." The plan was insane. The prison world, Zarakis 9, was a fortress. It orbited a dying star, surrounded by an artificial storm field that shredded anything that got too close. And beneath that, a labyrinth of high-security cells, force fields, and automated defenses. Breaking in would be impossible. Breaking out? Even worse. Evelyn grinned. "So, when do we start?" Kaler gave her a look. "You are enjoying this too much." She shrugged. "What can I say? I love a good jailbreak." They hit Zarakis 9 like a meteor. Evelyn piloted the ship through the storm field, dodging lightning arcs that could tear through a battleship. Kaler held on, wings tucked, ready to jump the second they were through. They crashed through the outer defenses, plasma cannons roaring, alarms blaring. And then, chaos. Kaler tore through the guards, his fire melting reinforced barriers like they were paper. Evelyn weaved through the corridors, taking down security drones with pinpoint shots. Cell after cell opened. Dragons, real dragons, emerged. Some weak, some scarred, but all alive. Kaler roared, and the others answered. The prison world shook. Evelyn fired up the comms. "We're getting out of here. Now." The dragons took flight, their wings tearing through the facility. The storm outside raged, but they didn't care. They were free. The battle didn't end there. The hunters came. Ships filled the sky. The stars burned. And humanity answered. Word of the jailbreak spread. Human colonies, smugglers, mercenaries, they joined in. Because humanity didn't forget. Because Evelyn's message had gone out across the stars. If you come for one of us, you come for all of us. The final battle was a legend. A sky filled with fire. A war that shook the galaxy. And when the dust settled, the dragons were free. Evelyn stood on the bridge of her ship, looking out at the stars. Beside her, Kaler watched as his kind flew through the void, no longer hunted, no longer alone. "You changed everything," he said. She smiled. "Nah, just did what any human would." Kaler huffed a small laugh. "Then I am glad to have met a human." Evelyn smirked. "Took you long enough to figure that out." Silence stretched between them. Then Kaler spoke, his voice quiet. "What now?" Evelyn's smile widened. "Now," she said, looking at the endless sky, we see what happens next. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. But in the deep void, on the edges of history, one phrase remained. If you come for one of us, you come for all of us. And the stars never forgot.